Gedanken experiment, another thought experiment. So in this arc of the night, slow wave sleep predominates early in the night and then REM sleep. There's a scenario that many people, including myself, experience on a regular basis, which is they go to sleep, sleeping just fine, 3-4 hours into it, they wake up.
Yeah.
They wake up for whatever reason. Maybe there was a noise, maybe the temperature isn't right. We will certainly talk about sleep hygiene, etc. They get up, they go to the restroom. They might flip on the lights, they might not. They'll get back in bed. Hopefully they're not picking up their phone and starting to browse and wake up the brain through various mechanisms, light and cognitive stimulation, etc. They go back to sleep. Let's say after about 10, 15 minutes, they're able to fall back asleep, and then they sleep till their more typical wake time.
Yeah.
How detrimental is that wake up episode or event in terms of longevity, learning, etc.? I would love to sleep the entire night through every night, but most nights I don't. And yet I feel pretty good throughout the day. Some days better than others.
Yeah.
So if you were to kind of evaluate that waking episode and compare it to sleeping the whole night through, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think if you're waking up sort of frequently as you're describing, I would probably get your estate in order, because my guess is within the next year you're going to be done for. No, I'm kidding you. Absolutely kidding you. It is perfectly natural and normal, particularly as we progress with age. You know, children tend to have typically more continuous sleep. Now, it's not that they aren't waking up for brief periods of time. They are. And in fact, we all do. When we come out the other end of our sleep cycle, at the end of our REM sleep period of the 90-minute cycle, almost everybody wakes up and we make a postural movement. We turn over because we've been paralyzed for so long, and the body will also like to shift.
Do we ever look around? Do we ever open our eyes and look around?
Sometimes people will open their eyes, but usually it's only for a brief period of time, and they usually never commit those awakenings to memory.
Right.
Your situation, and it's my situation as well. I usually now at this stage of life, I don't sleep through the night. I'll usually have a bathroom break, and then I'll come back. That's perfectly normal. We tend to forget that in sleep science, we think of sleep efficiency. So of the total amount of time that you're in bed, how much of that percent time is spent asleep? And we usually look to numbers that are above 85% or more as a healthy sleep efficiency. So if you were to think about me going to bed and I spend, let's say 8.25 hours of time in bed with a normal healthy sleep efficiency, I still may be only sleeping a total of 7.5 hours or 7.75 hours, meaning that I'm going to be awake in total, not in one long bout, but I'm going to be awake for upwards of 30 minutes net some time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that can be after a 10-minute, dalliance after having gone to the bathroom, and I'm just gradually drifting back off again. Other times it will just be for a couple of minutes, and most of those you don't commit. So I think we need to stop. We don't need to get too worried about periods of time awake just because we're not sleeping throughout the night. I would love to do that too, and I remember when that used to happen, and it still happens occasionally.
It feels great when it does happen.
It's a lovely thing,
but it's a surprise, right?
It is now a surprise.
Slept through the whole night.
Yeah, it is a surprise. Yeah. But for the most part, I think we can be more relaxed about that. Where we have to be a bit more attentive, though, is if you are spending long periods of time not being able to get back to sleep. And usually we define that by saying, if it's been 20, 25 minutes, normally that's a time when we would really say, okay, let's explore this. What's going on? Let's see what's happening. The other thing is if it's happening very frequently. So even if you're, not awake for 25-minute stretches, but you're finding yourself waking up and being consciously aware that you've woken up for maybe 6, 7, or 8 times throughout the night, and your sleep is very what we call fragmented. The great science of sleep in the past 5 or 10 years has been, yes, quantity is important, but quality is just as important. And you can't have one without the other in terms of a good, beneficial next day outcome. You can't just get 4 hours of sleep, but brilliant quality of sleep and be unimpaired. Right. Nor can you get 8 hours of sleep, but have very poor quality of sleep and be unimpaired the next day. So that's why I just sort of want to asterisk this idea of let's not get too worried about waking up and having some time awake. That's perfectly normal and natural. But if it's happening very frequently throughout the night, or those periods of time, or long stretches of time, upwards of 25 minutes, then let's look into it.
Well, I can assure you just helped a lot of people feel better about this waking up episode that I and many other people experience.
I hope so, because I think it's really important that we, I think I've been desperately guilty of perhaps, early on being too puritanical about, sleep. And I've retrospected and I've tried to explore why this was the case. It was almost sleep or else ...
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I was starting to write the book, which was back in 2016, sleep was still a neglected stepsister in the health conversation of today. And I could
that
see
has certainly
all
changed.
And it's changing, and not because of my efforts, but
no,
because of all of my colleagues.
I would say, it's great that you give attribution to the other people involved. And of course, it's a big field, but I think you've done a great service by cueing people to the importance of this state, not just for avoiding troublesome outcomes, but also for optimizing their waking state. It's really, I view sleep as this period that feels good, but we're not aware of how it feels when we're in it necessarily. It has tremendous benefits when you're doing it well, so to speak, and it has tremendous deficits when we're not. And I think it was an important thing for you to do to cue people to this issue. And I would say mission accomplished, that people are aware of the need for sleep. I think that knowing that waking up in the middle of the night is normal, provided it's not too frequent, is great, and will also help people who may have been overly concerned about that. I do want to use this as an opportunity to raise something about the so-called Uberman schedule, not to be confused with the Huberman schedule. Fortunately, no one has confused those yet. Some years ago, there was a discussion about the so-called Uberman schedule, meaning the Superman schedule. So that's Huberman without an H, which I have nothing to do with. If you read your Nietzsche, this will have a subtext. But regardless, the Uberman schedule, as I understand, is one in which the person elects to sleep in 90-minute bouts spread throughout the day and night in an attempt to get more productivity and or reduce their overall sleep need. There was a paper published recently that explored whether or not this is good or bad for us. Maybe you just give us the take-home message on that.
Yeah, so these Uberman-like schedules, and there's lots of different forms of that. They tried to essentially pie chart the 24-hour period into short bouts of sleep with some shorter slightly longer periods of wakefulness, then short bouts of sleep, then wakefulness. I sort of made it, I think, a quip. It's almost like you're sleeping like a baby, because that's the way that babies
in 90-minute
will
naps.
sleep. That they all have, these brief naps, then they're awake, then they're asleep, then they're awake. And to the chagrin of parents, across the night, it's basically the same. They're awake, they're asleep, they're awake, they're asleep. And that's more the schedule that these types of protocols have suggested. And there was a really great comprehensive review that found not only that they weren't necessarily helpful, but they were actually really quite detrimental. And on almost every performance metric, whether it be task performance, whether it be physiological outcome measures, whether it even be the quality of the sleep that they were having when they were trying to get it, all of those were in a downward direction. And it's not surprising. If you look at the way that your physiology is programmed, if you look at the way your circadian rhythm is programmed, none of that screams to us that we should be sleeping in that way.
Well, I'm chuckling because we always hear sleep like a baby. This is how babies sleep. And
Right.
I would say don't sleep like a baby, sleep like an adult. Be an
Yeah,
adult.
I mean, it's
get your solid 8 hours.
It's Billy
Yeah.
Crystal's line, who's a long-standing suffering insomniac. He says, "I sleep like a baby. I'm awake every 20 minutes." And I think this is another one of those demonstrations that when you fight biology, you normally lose. And the way you know you've lost is disease, sickness, and impairment. And I think if you sleep in accordance with the natural biological edict that we've all been given, life tends to be both of a higher quality and a longer duration.
Yeah, I agree. Along those lines, as a vision scientist, I've been very excited by the work on these non-image forming cells in the eye, the so-called melanopsin cells that inform the brain about circadian time of day. And I'm a big proponent of people getting some sunlight, ideally sunlight, but other forms of bright light into their eyes early in the day and when they want to be awake.
Yep.
Essentially during the phase of their 24-hour circadian cycle when temperature is rising, and then starting to get less light in their eyes as our temperature is going down in terms of later in the day and in the evening. Are there any adjustments to that general theme that you'd like to add, or is in any way?
No, I think that's exactly what we recommend right now, which is try to get at least 30 to 40 minutes of exposure to some kind of natural daylight. Now, there may be parts of the world where
you're from a rather cloudy part of the world.
I am from Liverpool, England, and the northwest of England is not known for its beach resorts and fine weather. I remember I went back home for a trip when I'd first been out in California, and I thought, why is the sky so low? It's just constantly out. We joke that in the UK, we usually have 9 months of bad weather and then 3 months of winter, and then that's your entire year in terms of a climate. But to come to your point, you're exactly right. Try to get that daylight. Now, it can be working next to a window and you're getting that natural sunlight, but that natural sunlight is, even on a cloudy day in England, is usually far more potent than anything that you'll get from indoor lighting, despite you thinking, sort of from a perception wise, maybe they're much closer than I would think.
Yeah, I've been, sorry to interrupt, I've been a big proponent of, there's an app called Light Meter, which it's a free app, I have nothing to do with it, that will allow you to get a pretty decent measurement of the amount of light energy coming toward you. And if you hold it up to a cloudy morning where you don't think it's very bright out, kind of a dismal day, you'll notice that there'll be 1,000, 2,000, even 5,000 lux just being a measure of brightness, of course. And then you can point the same light meter toward an indoor light that seems very bright and very intense, and it'll say 500 lux. And you realize that the intensity as we gauge it perceptually is not really what the system is receiving. So outdoor light is key. How do you get this natural stimulation, or I should just say light stimulation early in the day? What does Matt Walker do to get this light stimulation?
I am no poster child, but usually I will, if I'm working out, I usually work out most days. And I shopped around and I found a gym that has huge amounts of window exposure facing to the east. This is going to sound so ridiculous. Matt Walker chooses a gym on the basis of the solar input, so he can,
there are a lot of criteria for selecting gyms. This one is actually grounded in physiology and biology, and
selfishness about my own sleep.
No, that's great. So you get your exercise and your light stimulation simultaneously.
That's right. Yep.
And so you're stacking cues for wakefulness early in the day.
Exactly. So both exercise and daylight are wonderful cues for circadian rhythm alignment and also circadian rhythm reset each day. And so I will use both exercise. I mean, I'm neither a strong morning type or a strong evening type, and my preference to exercise is probably sometime in the middle of the day, probably somewhere around 1 p.m. Sorry, not 1 a.m. But I'm usually working out probably around the sort of 7:45, 8 a.m. time. That's usually when I'll start my workout. And there I'll start with cardio, spin bike, facing a window. And luckily, for the most part here in California, there's usually sunlight coming through. But it doesn't matter to me because, just as you said, even when it's a cloudy day, that lux coming through of light, the intensity is splendid. So I would prefer to favor my exercise just because for efficiency too. I want to get also working on the day. I'll try to match my exercise more with my circadian light exposure than I would probably if I'm going to, do I really want to crush a workout, or do I want to just, make sure it's a good workout? I would prefer to work out, at a different time. But I like that because of the daylight. And we can speak about exercise timing at some point, because there's a lot of discussion around that. When is the right time to exercise during sleep? And we can sort of bust some myths there too. So I think you're spot on with the suggestion. Get some morning daylight. Try to get that exposure, usually at least 30 to 40 minutes. There was some great work recently coming out in the occupational health domain, where they moved workers from offices that were just facing walls and didn't have any exposure to natural daylight, and then they did a time period during that study where they actually were in front of a window and working, and they measured their sleep. And their sleep time and their sleep efficiency increased quite dramatically. I'm forgetting the numbers now, but I think the increase in total sleep time was well over 30 minutes, and the improvement in sleep efficiency was 5 to 10%. And if you're batting an 80%, sleep efficiency average, we're a bit concerned about that. But add 10% to that, and now you're in, a great echelon of healthy sleepers. And all you did was just spend some time working in front of windows.
That's great. And probably folks might want to consider spending a little less time with sunglasses, provided they can do that safely, driving, et cetera. You're not alone with your exercise behavior and facing east. So the one and only Tim Ferriss told me recently that his morning routine nowadays consists of jumping rope while facing east to get the sunlight stimulation of the eyes. And as Matt and I both know, it has to be of the eyes, right? I mean, these portals are the only way to convey to the rest of the brain and body about the time of day and wakefulness. Along the lines of wakefulness, I have a number of questions about